Hi everyone, welcome to Things Lucy Reads. I'm Luce and this is my very late November wrap up. So this month I read a total of 3 books and I DNF'd 1, and I participated in 2 readathons, and that was the Middle Earth Road Trip readathon and also NetGalley November. So the NetGalley books I have uploaded reviews on Goodreads for, and I will link them down below, as well as the one that I DNF'd because technically that was also for NetGalley. The first book that I read was Wild Beauty by A.M. Macklemore, which I loved. I gave it 5 stars, and I actually talked about that in the second episode of the Burger Vlog, which I will link up here. If you want to hear more in-depth thoughts about that one, then definitely go and check that out. But this is a story about this family of women who believe that they are cursed and that if they love too hard, then their lovers will disappear. And they live on the estate of this family called the Bryars. Yeah. Second guess myself for a second there, and their lives are intrinsically tied with the lives of that family, not least because all of the younger generation of the women of this family are in love with the heir to that estate, and in order to keep her safe they make an offering to the grounds of the place where they live, which is called La Pradera, and then the day after they make that offering there's a boy there all of a sudden, and they kind of assume that he's a boy that was disappeared because someone in their family loved him too much. And then throughout the book they unravel that assumption and find out the true history of their family and the land where they live, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. Like, I'd never read an A.M. Macklemore book before this one, and I now understand why everyone is so obsessed with them, because I am too, and it was just so beautiful and magical, and I think if I read it again it would sink in a little more and I would probably cry. Yeah, it was just fabulous and I really adored it. And then the next book that I read was a tour short, and it was Legacy Lost by Anna Banks, which is a prequel novella for the Serena Legacy series, which I have the first book of, but was sort of humming and hawing about whether or not I actually wanted to read it, and after I've read this one I think maybe I don't. So this was about, there's essentially 2 rival families, and it was sort of a little bit like a Romeo and Juliet thing where these families are not really on good terms, and well, the families are on good terms but the 2 like heirs of them are supposed to marry each other but they don't really get along. But then they kind of start spending time with each other and they do start to get along, and of course it ends in tragedy. And I didn't like either of those characters, and I thought, I don't know, it didn't really do anything for me. I gave it 2 stars. I think there are better mermaid books out there, or at least ones that I will like more, and I will probably just read those instead. And then the next book I read was On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden, which I adored. I gave it 5 stars. This is a dual timeline book. There's this girl, oh god, and I've forgotten her name. It starts out and she's taking this job on a spaceship, and the people on this spaceship fix up old ruins and kind of return them to their former glory so that the buildings can be used again, but they're in space. And then the other half of the story is that girl at school and her relationship with her first girlfriend, and then it ties a little bit into that girlfriend's family situation and like where she comes from, and then that ties back in a big circle to the lives of the people on the spaceship. And just the way it was all woven together, and the way kind of you were fed threads of it here and there until it kind of came together into one big gorgeous tapestry, was just absolutely amazing, and I'm completely in awe. It was just great. There were 2 FF relationships and a non-binary side character, and now that I think about it, I don't think there was a single man in that book. Everyone was a woman or a non-binary person. But yeah, it was great and I really loved it. If you want like a sprawling queer found family like space adventure, that's your book. It was really great. So Wild Beauty was one of the books I read for the Middle Earth readathon. I also read On a Sunbeam for that readathon as well. And then the next 3 books I read for the NetGalley November readathon and the Middle Earth Road Trip readathon. And they were We Awaken by Callista Lynn, which is the book that I DNF'd. So my full review for that is down below. Ultimately it boils down to, I think the book had a lot of potential, but the writer at the time of writing didn't have the skill to pull it off, and the book was just kind of flat. I made it, I think it was 17%, which was the beginning of chapter 4. Nothing much had really happened. It was very slow. There was little to no like actual setup for the fantastical nature of the novel. Not enough was explained in that 17%. We were just kind of expected to take it at face value. And I said in the review that, so like I think both the main character and her love interest are asexual, and apparently the ace rep is good, but I didn't actually get far enough to hit that, like where it was explicitly stated that they were asexual. But it was also very insta-lovey. So like they met twice, and on the second meeting, like there was hints of it on the first meeting as well, but by the second meeting the main character was like, oh, this girl has a crush on me, like for real, and started referring to their second meeting in the main character's dreams no less as a date. They're both girls, romantically interested in girls, and there's a lesbian joke to be made here, but I just really didn't buy anything that the book was telling me, and ultimately I didn't feel bothered to continue reading, so I DNF'd it, which is unfortunate because it was a book for NetGalley, and so far this writer hasn't written anything else, but if she ever does, I will probably check that out. And then the next book that I read was Finna by Nino Chipri, which was incredible, and this was for, like I said, for both readathons. I will leave my review of it down below. So the main characters of this work in this store, which is like, it's like IKEA, but it's not IKEA, obviously, because you can't, you know, trademarks and all of that. Discover in very quick succession that not only has a customer gone missing in the store, the customer has gone missing through a wormhole in the store. And this is quite a normal occurrence for this chain of stores. Wormholes pop up so often that they once had a specialized division for dealing with them, but through budget cuts, that division was shut down. So now whenever a customer goes missing in a wormhole, 2 employees have to just take the equipment and go after her, and it's the 2 employees who are like most junior on the ladder, and that happens to be the main character and her ex-lover, who is a non-binary person, and they broke up 4 days before, and the main character wasn't even supposed to be at work. It's just that she was covering because someone else called in sick. And so they have to go through this wormhole to try and find this customer, and while they're doing that, they kind of dredge through all of their emotional and relationship baggage on the way. And I just really loved that aspect of it, that they were on this like really grave adventure, but they were snarking at each other the entire time, and I was really rooting for them by the end, because like it was not even a case of like one person was at fault in the relationship. They were both at fault, and both of them took each other to task for the things that they did wrong, the things that they did that was shitty. And I really feel like by the end, even though they probably won't ever be lovers again, they'll at least be able to be friends. And I'm a bit sad that the sequel to this book doesn't actually follow them any further, but the point, like this is like pretty much what I said in my review also, one of the points of the book was that you've just discovered that there are multiple different universes and multiple different worlds, and ultimately it's up to you to decide what kind of world you're in and what kind of world you're going to make it. Like there are some worlds where you're a coward, there are some worlds where like you're brave, and there are some worlds where things work out and things don't, and your actions play a part in that. So in the spirit of that, I'm choosing to believe that I live in the world where at the end of this book things turn out well for these characters, and I feel like it's left open-ended and up to your own interpretation, specifically because that's the point of the book, that ultimately it's up to you. But I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I'm going to pick up the sequel one of these days, and I'm sure I will love it just as much as I love the first one. And then the next book that I read is The 4 Profound Weaves by R.M. Lemberg. I will also link my review for that down below. I love this book almost too much for words, and I don't know if I can articulate how I feel about it. The main characters of this book are both trans, but they have radically different experiences of being trans, and they're from different communities that have radically different perspectives of trans people and like levels of acceptance and all of this. It's really complex, and not in a way that doesn't make sense, but just in a way that makes it hard to talk about to someone. But this book is about their friendship, and it's about one of the characters' aunts who has been exiled from the community, and they have to go and find her in order to help to save the world from the tyrannical leader. And these characters are both in their 60s, like they have grandchildren, and they're the ones going and saving the world. And I just thought that it was really fantastic. And even though their friendship was fraught in places, in the end they chose to support each other at every turn, and I really, really loved that. And it was one of those books where it just kind of hits every single one of your buttons in a way that you didn't know you needed them to be hit, and it was just so perfect for me, and I adored it. And not to make light of it, but when I was reading it I was thinking, I don't know why I ever bothered with Dune when this desert adventure fantasy exists instead. So if you're reading Dune and you think it's a little bit homogenous, a little bit white savoury, not queer enough, you're a little unsatisfied with it, read The Four Profound Weaves and it will probably do everything that you wanted Dune to do but were let down about. Because it was absolutely wonderful and I will definitely be reading it again. It's the most trans book I've ever read, and even though it wasn't smooth sailing, I really appreciated that, like, there were elements of transphobia within the story, and one of the characters especially delayed their transition because one of their lovers asked them to. Because, so, like, there were those aspects in it, and like not everything was peachy, but that character never really lost their sense of self or their conviction in their sense of self. And even though they did delay their transition for the sake of their lover and it affected them and it affected like the ease of their life post-transition, like they just never doubted their own self, and I really adored that. And please just read this book. If you're not cis, read this book. And I feel like also, like, I'm pretty sure the author is Jewish, and I think that if you are Jewish as well, there's much more to this story that you will pick up on, but I'm not Jewish and I know nothing, so there's probably a lot of it that I'm missing. But even with that, like, I loved this, and I really hope more people read it because I want this author to write more things. It was just so fantastic, and I loved it with my whole heart, and I gave it 5 stars. And then the last book that I read this month was the second volume of the comic series The Backstages by James Tynion IV and a lot of other people whose names I didn't write down. I apologize. So this is about a group of kids who work as backstagers for their high school's theatre troupe, and underneath the theatre there's a subterranean magical maze of tunnels. Excuse me while I lose my balance. There's like this, yeah, magical set of tunnels underneath the theatre, and you go there and you meet monsters, and it's just a really wild ride. In this one, they go into the tunnels and they sort of go missing, and then they come back and they find out that because they've been gone for so long, the backstages are being shut down and the school's gonna hire like professional backstage people because it essentially just lost a bunch of kids and they got in trouble about it. So the backstagers have to work together to like save the theatre troupe in general, but like their own club, and it was just a really fun ride. I think it suffered a little bit because it's been so long since I read the first one, but there are only 3 volumes, so I think I might do a I read it in one day kind of video about this series at some point next year, because I really did enjoy it. It's very queer, it's very diverse, there's a lot of characters of different races represented. We find out in this volume that one of the characters is trans. I don't remember if that came out in the first volume and I just forgot, or if it was just only revealed now, but I thought that was wonderful and that was handled really well. And I gave it a 3.5 stars because like it was good, but it didn't necessarily wow me, and it's entirely a me thing. I had gaps in my knowledge because it's been so long since I read the first one. It's, yeah. A star rating is a measure of personal enjoyment and not necessarily objective quality. Like, you know what I mean. If I read it again closely after the first one, I might rate it higher just because I'll probably get more out of it if I don't have these gaps in my memory. So yeah, those were all of the books that I read in November. As always, if you've read any of them and you want to let me know what you thought of them, feel free to do that down below. If you just want to let me know that you were here, leave me any emoji that you feel like. Or if you want to be specific, leave me the one of like the 2 theatre masks, you know, one's like this, one's like this. Leave me that emoji. Otherwise, that's all I have for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I will try and be more timely with my December wrap up, but I'm not promising anything. But yeah, I will see you when I see you. Bye for now.